Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots, and welcome back to another Gen Z episode with Pastor Matt and I talking about topics that are on my heart, Gen Z's heart, and Pastor Matt's heart, and all of our hearts collectively together, where we can talk about new ideas. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well,
I don't know.
Revolutionary ideas.
Yes, really, truly revolutionary ideas.
Have you seen what's been going on in Nepal and now Madagascar yesterday?
Yes, I have. It is quite interesting, and you called it the Zoomer.
That's what they call it, Zoomer Revolution.
That makes me think of like Boomer and Gen Z combined.
Yeah, Zoomer Revolution.
So explain that.
So color revolutions are a technique that was developed to bring down countries by first removing the morals out of a society, and then secondly, destabilizing key institutions in a country to finally bring it down. The color in America that apparently has been chosen is purple.
What does that mean?
They always have a color to
purple
rally behind. For us, as Christians, purple means royalty. So they're like, they want to use our color, and they want to use purple as, like, they never wear purple unless they look like Grimace, you know what I mean? And so
Grimace.
Yeah, I'm digging deep in the vault right now,
Oh
right?
my.
But they really don't own that color. Christians own that color because it's a color that represents the royalty of Jesus Christ. So they pick a color that people can rally behind. So one of the ways to defeat a color revolution is to attack the color. But back to your question, on top of that, what they're trying to do, and they tested it in Nepal, now they tested it successfully in Madagascar, is they want to use young people as the vanguard of the revolution to take over a country, even though they don't maybe constitute a majority, that there may be a minority. They want to use them as the vanguard to try to take over a country. So this is just another extension of revolutionary communism, and just the idea of destabilizing countries, and then eventually leading to a moment of crisis and chaos in which they will come in with the solution, which is obviously communism, throwing out the Constitution of the United States, which is never going to happen with 20 plus million armed veterans in this country who voted for President Trump. I think that they've underestimated the numbers, number one. Number two, it's important that Gen Z gets the truth.
Right.
And isn't just repeating over and over and over again the same talking point as if that's what makes something true.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up communism, because I've been doing a little reading myself. I have actually been reading the Communist Manifesto and Capital by Karl Marx. I acquired a 1952 copy of said books, and there's some very interesting things in there. One of the things that I found very interesting was that America was named like the perpetrator of the bourgeoisie, literally, and saying that America was the reason that capital was increasing so fervently, and basically stating that America was the enemy. It is how I read it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And obviously I'm not done with it. I literally started like 2 days ago, and the words are very large, and things are worded weirdly because it wasn't written in 1952. It was printed then, but it was written in
written in German.
Yeah, and it's a little odd. But there are some things that I wanted to ask you some questions about that are directly in the Communist Manifesto, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the context is it was written in 1848 by Karl Marx.
Yes.
And then Das Kapital was kind of his expansion on kind of economic theory.
Yeah.
Just if we could just set a quick baseline of understanding of economics, which is not taught in many universities today.
Okay.
But just a quick non-history.
Go for it.
So there's really 4 or 5 main systems, economic systems in the world. And every system is actually capitalist. The question is, who owns the capital? Capital is defined as the means of production. So in a free market system, which is what we believe in for the United States, and we're not totally free market.
Is free market free buy, free sell, free trade?
The way I would define it is capital that is owned and controlled privately. Okay? So a system that came out of Italy really birthed out of the socialist movement there, and its leader, who was the chief editor for the Italian socialist newspaper Avanti, which means forward. And you'll see in a lot of communist documents and communist rhetoric and signs and things, their motto will be forward. It was also the motto of Barack Hussein Obama as well, which is not coincidence because he was groomed and mentored by communists. So Benito Mussolini was the chief editor of the Italian socialist newspaper. He's really the father, although there's a couple other people involved, father of fascism. And fascism was the idea that you could own your capital privately, but it would be controlled. Certain key manufacturing sectors would be controlled. And Hitler went and visited Benito Mussolini, and he liked his system so much that he incorporated it into the National Socialist system. So fascism is one system, then the National Socialism is another system where not just certain manufacturing sectors and transportation or things like that, but key war-making manufacturing sectors. So, for example, Volkswagen was really created by the Nazi Party as a way of manufacturing not just cars, but manufacturing tanks and other armaments. So, in that system, there was some ownership of capital privately, but the government controlled almost all of it.
Yeah.
And owned key manufacturing sectors. So whereas in fascism, they tried to control key manufacturing sectors, in National Socialism, they actually owned key manufacturing sectors. Then you have socialism, which is the idea of controlling and leveraging certain key elements of the economy beyond manufacturing. So for example, healthcare, communications. So like PBS would be an outgrowth of that idea.
Right.
So socialism just owns and controls more in that sector. And then communism, all capital is owned and controlled by the state.
Yeah.
So those are the differences in economic systems, just as a real quick, simple baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know I've heard you say multiple times that in, this chapter of the Communist Manifesto, it says this. In this one, it says this. And as I'm reading this, I'm literally sitting there and going, oh my gosh, it really says that.
Yeah.
And they're not even hiding it. And here's a very interesting chapter 2, Communist Manifesto. Here we go. You ready, people? We communists have been reproached with the desire of abolishing the right of personally acquiring property as the fruit of a man's own labor, which property is alleged to be the groundwork of all personal freedom, activity, and independence. Hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned property. Do you mean the property of the petty artisan and the small peasant? See, it's so interesting to me how, even the writings seem, aggressive and petty.
They do.
And what's interesting is there's a biographical note, I said that right, note of Karl Marx in the beginning of this book, and he died in poverty.
He did.
He died ill in poverty. His wife died. He wasn't even with his wife when she died. He was not happy. 3 of his 6 children, I think it was 3 of his 6 children died. He was not a happy man.
It's sad.
And it breaks my heart because I'm like, wow, he's out here fighting for this way of life when he literally died. His system of beliefs did not help him live a better life.
No, they didn't. In fact, he was a Satanist. He was a self-admitted Satanist. You can read his works. He wrote poetry. Before he wrote Communist Manifesto, he wrote poetry in 1837. You can read those verses where he had admitted that he knew he was going to hell. He literally said those words, and so wrote those words. And so you have a man that's obviously very tormented, and who lived a life that would not be an example for others to follow. And yet his system is really a system that is all about taking control over governments. It isn't a system that can really be sustained.
Right.
It is a system that's all about seizing control. In fact, I would simplify it even further and say it's a system of gangsterism.
Well, it's interesting because his ideas, as I read more and more, the idea of being employed by someone he sees as a way of exploiting humankind. So having an employer, somebody who owns a factory per se, is an example he uses here, is exploiting humankind because as capital, as the demand increases, you need more workers, you need them work longer hours. And so he's just saying that someone who owns a company, who started a company, is exploiting humankind for asking them to work and give them money for their time.
Yes. And, it's interesting. What he says is obviously directly contradicted by the Bible.
Right.
The Bible talks about enjoying the fruits of your labor in many different passages. Talks about also that you shall not steal, which implies a property right. It was the Jewish understanding, the Christian understanding that there is a property right there. And that what God has done is he's given us certain things on this earth to steward. And we're supposed to steward those things well. So there is private property on this earth. And we are supposed to acknowledge where we get our wealth from, and that is from God. We're also supposed to, we don't get it from the state, which is what he advocates.
Right.
And just a side note, Victoria, my wife, who grew up, as you know, in the former Soviet Union, she said that communism doesn't increase anybody's wealth. It makes everybody poor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's kind of the idea behind what we're talking about is the biblical system creates the most prosperity for the most amount of people. And that's not just me saying it. The atheist communist Chinese investigated the United States of America and found, after looking at our political system and our economic system and our system regarding our military strength and technology, that it was our religion, Christianity, that gave rise to the free market system and made the West great. That's the Chinese that came to that conclusion. Because if each individual is responsible for stewarding their part, then that can flourish. And in the early, and this is interesting, a lot of people don't know this, some of the first colonists tried socialism here in the United States, where certain people would be responsible for other people's crops, and it was an absolute failure. But when they switched to a free market system where you were responsible for your own crop, everyone prospered. Everyone did, because you had enough extra you could trade with others, and they benefited from it.
And when we come back from the break, we are going to be diving into some more exact quotes from the Communist Manifesto.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
All right, we're back from the break talking about communism. Straight up communism, straight up the Communist Manifesto, in which I'm reading from personally in my own private time to educate myself, to make sure I know what I'm talking about, and also to show you guys what the Communist Manifesto actually says. And I would be interested to see how many college students that are protesting for the Communist Socialist Party of America have actually read the Communist Manifesto. And if a lot of them have, good for you. And you want our country to be like that, go to somewhere that is a communist country, please, and leave this one alone. Thank you. Okay, so we were just talking about how if you were responsible for someone else's crops, it did not work.
It didn't work.
When you were responsible for your own crops, it worked.
It worked.
Listen to what Karl Marx says here. It has been objected that upon the abolition of private property, all work will cease and universal laziness will overtake us.
Yes, that is.
And so that is generally regarded as what we believe would happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is exactly what happens. I don't know if anybody remembers COVID when everybody lost their jobs. I lost my job. Did you lose your job? I did. Well, then we all got stimulus checks. I actually didn't qualify for that, so I was just really, really poor for a while. But yeah, everybody got money from the government. We didn't have to work, and we just kept getting money and money and money. And then when we were like, oh, everybody go back into work, guess who didn't go back into work?
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody, because we were still getting money from the government.
You know, in the former Soviet Union, they had huge problems. They had to enact quotas out of manufacturing facilities because people weren't doing anything. They would just show up to work and not do anything. And this is exactly to the point that Karl Marx even recognized that his theory would fail here.
Yeah, and he also says there can no longer be any wage labor when there is no longer any capital.
Yes, because there would be no means of production. Yeah,
exactly. So my thought is here: who runs society in this situation? How does a society thrive in this situation? So there's no capital, there's no paying jobs. So what exactly do you do?
So there are several different types of government in the world. I'm just going to focus. There's really only two: a republic, rule of law, where no matter who's in power, you still have rights that are given to us by God, or an oligarchy. And so to answer your question, oligarchs run this. There's a chosen few who know better than everybody else the policies and everything to implement, and everybody else works. And they end up, interestingly, being the ones who get all the special privileges. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Chinese have an island that they go to, Chinese Communist Party leaders go to, and they get special treatment and massages and all this weird stuff happens on that island.
Sounds like Epstein Island.
Yeah, it's weird.
To me.
But they all get that because they're in the elite. And so this idea that communism, everybody's going to be equal, it goes against human nature. It has never happened. And in fact, what does happen is death and destruction and thievery.
Yeah, and then what's even more interesting is his view on the family and his view on women. I was really confused when I was reading this particular passage last night because I was like, am I understanding this correctly? Is he just saying this really weirdly? But I believe that I am understanding this correctly. So first of all, the bourgeois, these words,
so
bourgeois and bourgeoisie.
Stop using bougie. It comes from communism. Stop using bougie. Everybody's using bougie out there, some kind of cool word.
I really don't like this word anymore because he uses it so much and I hate saying it. The bourgeois and the bourgeoisie, okay. And the bourgeois claptrap about the family and the education, about the hollowed correlation of parent and child, becomes all the more disgusting, the more by the action of modern industry, all family ties among the proletarians are torn asunder and their children transformed into simple articles of commerce and instruments of labor. So here I'm seeing that very, very poor people are forced to have their children working in factories and working to provide for their families. That is something that did happen. However, I find it funny that he called the bourgeois claptrap of family. Like, that feels like an old insult to me.
It is.
You know, that just feels like, I feel like he's like insulting the family there. He's like, oh, you claptrap family. I don't know what that means. So if that means something bad, I'm sorry. But here's the best part, guys. Are you ready? But you communists would introduce community of women, screams the whole bourgeoisie in chorus. The bourgeois sees in his wife a mere instrument of production. He hears that the instruments of production are to be exploited in common, and naturally can come to no other conclusion than that the lot of being common to all will likewise fall to the woman.
He is saying that women belong to the community.
And he's also saying that also, like, a regular family man is cheating on his wife, and he doesn't respect her, he doesn't love her, he just sees her as a means to reproduce children.
Absent Christianity, maybe that is the case. I don't know, but the fact of the matter is that what he's saying is that the family needs to be abolished in this same stream of thought.
So here it is. For the rest, nothing is the more ridiculous than the virtuous indignation of our bourgeois at the community of women, which they pretend to be openly and officially established by the communists. The communists have no need to introduce community of women. It has existed almost from time immemorial. Our bourgeois are not content with having the wives and daughters of their proletarians at their disposal, not to speak of common prostitutes, take the greatest pleasure in seducing each other's wives. Bourgeois marriage is in reality a system of wives in common, and thus at the most, what the communists might possibly be reproached with is that they desire to introduce in substitution for a hypocritically concealed and openly legalized community of women. For the rest, it is self-evident that the abolition of the present system of production must bring with it the abolition of the community of women springing from that system, i.e. of prostitution, both public and private.
This is a reason, so there's a couple things I want to highlight here. So here was the practical application of this.
It's gross.
Soviet army carried prostitutes behind them in BTRs, so behind their army, so they would have a community of women. In addition to that, Saul Alinsky here in the United States, famous communist here in the U.S., every time he would do, or not every time, but most of the time he would do interviews, and the ones that we have, he would have a prostitute on each arm. And this is 1960, so it was very scandalous at that time, 1950s and 60s, to have this guy sitting there, clearly flouting family and values and Christianity, just saying, I'm not going to pay attention to it. So, but this is the outgrowth of it, is no morals.
So I'm reading this correctly. He is saying that instead of having marriage and, a man cheating on his wife in secret, if that is
just be open about it.
Just like, we're just going to have community women.
That's right.
Like, she doesn't belong to him. She doesn't belong to him. She belongs to everyone. She's for the streets. She's for the boys. Here you go. Like, their property? Like,
Isn't that weird?
So this is so interesting to me because this made me make the connection between OnlyFans and like online prostitution and like all of these women who are like the sexual revolution.
Yep, it's an outgrowth of socialism.
How women are like, well, I don't want to get married. I don't want to belong to anybody, but I'll do all of this stuff. I'll get paid for my nudes or whatever I'll do, but I don't want to belong to one man. And I'm like, that's literally what they want. They just want women that are for everyone.
Yeah. He's turned people into property. Yep.
Into commodities.
Yes.
I don't like it.
Well, of course, you shouldn't like it. I mean, in Christianity, in the family, marriage between one man and one woman is the standard, the biblical standard. Adam and Eve, one man and one woman, and it's the best place to raise a child. And the whole point is not necessarily even about the husband and wife, but it's about the generational call that's on a family. From a Christian perspective, God has a purpose for every human being, and God has a purpose for the family. So what he wants to do is abolish all of that and just throw it into profligacy, no morals, abolish the family, abolish private property. Well, at that point, everything actually becomes a commodity if you think about it.
Well, then what is there to live for?
Exactly.
Like everything that I would say keeps a person motivated to get up in the morning. Not saying, Jesus should be your reason, but like, having a job, having a family, having people to provide for, having people in your life that care about you.
Everything can be bought. And in fact, that's what happened in the former Soviet system. It's still happening in communist systems today. That's why communist systems have huge black markets. It's because everything can be bought and sold.
It's so interesting because his view of things that hold value is so weirdly skewed.
The Christian understanding of free markets is that everything that I produce should edify the rest of humanity, should build up the rest of humanity, should move forward the rest of humanity. And so true entrepreneurs will find a gap in the system that fills a need, and they will fill that need. And it's a very Christian thing to do. They're loving their neighbors in that way through the business sphere of influence. So communism, though, everything becomes a commodity. And now, if you hear the undertone here, it's really about envy. Communism is the gospel of envy. It's, I can get that woman if I want her. I can get that commodity if I want it.
Yeah.
Everything becomes about self. And actually what this is a screed of narcissism and making human beings selfish, because if they're not, they'll lose everything.
Well, because it's so interesting, because when I'm reading the manifesto and the book at the beginning, Capital, he was talking about the value of things, of commodities. And he's saying how certain things have intrinsic value because of the amount of labor it takes to produce said item. So diamonds have more value because they're rarer, fewer and far between. The amount of labor it takes to find a diamond and hone it and make it valuable, right? If it were as common as, dirt on the ground, it wouldn't have as much value, right? Because it doesn't take as much to produce it. But it's so interesting because he's showing you the value of things, but also trying to take away the value of things at the same time to make you think that you shouldn't want to have it. Because he's jealous because he doesn't have it.
But everybody wants it.
But it's so weird.
I know it's upside down.
But he's kind of smart. He's kind of a smart guy, because with the way that he writes this stuff, it's like you're kind of going, wait a minute, okay, well that's true. What you're saying about this is true, but the way you're saying it and what you're using this truth for doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it's actually a half truth. So
right.
So here he acknowledges the value of labor. Then he turns around and says it's not yours. Well, then whose is it?
Well, then he's also saying that human labor is just exploiting humankind.
And basically everything is an exploitation.
Exactly.
So in that case, then how are you exploit? So the question would be to him, then what are you exploiting out of this book? And the answer is power. This is all about seizing
They
power.
actually do talk about that.
Yeah.
They actually say that this is about seizing power. It's so interesting because right after we're done talking about the group women, talking about group women, here we go. The communists are further reproached with desiring to abolish countries and nationality.
There it is.
There it is.
Because if
One world order.
Yeah, if they can do that, then they can control everyone. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how communism is genocide.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back from the break talking about how communism literally says in the manifesto that it would like to abolish countries and nations. And then it goes on to say the working men have no country. So if you are of the working class, you're blue collar, you do the hard labor, you got no country, guys.
So what happens if...
We cannot take from them what they do not have, what they have not got, if we want to quote.
So what happens if I have a country? And you say I don't, but I say I do. What does that lead to?
Well, here we go. He says the proletariat must first of all acquire political supremacy, must rise to be the leading class of the nation, must constitute itself the nation. It is so far itself national, though not in the bourgeois sense of the word. So he's trying to say, I had to look up what the proletariat meant. It's a communist word used to describe the lowest of the lowest class. And they're saying, we don't like the bourgeoisie because they own everything, they rule everything. But in order for this to work, you have to ascend to political power, but not like they are. No, not like them. You're going to do it differently. But
through deception,
But it's the exact same thing.
Well, so the system that Karl Marx created, Lenin operationalized and Mao perfected, and what you're seeing there is it raises questions. So Christianity is a nation in the sense of we are, as Christians, one ethnicity in the spirit. Okay, so the question then becomes: if I, as a Christian, say I'm not going to go along with your what? Oh, it's not a nation, but it actually sounds like one. It's a communist nation. He's advocating for a communist nation.
Yep.
So if I don't go along with it, what are you going to do? Well, eventually they have to wipe people out. That's why communism leads to genocide.
I believe he also did say that somewhere in here that it actually leads to action or violence.
Yeah, violence. And Lenin went further and said that the social roots of religion needed to be eliminated. And this is why, because the social roots of religion are inherently going to be opposed to the communists coming to power and establishing things, and establishing a communist nation. So eliminating people then becomes a core tenet. In fact, it's not even a core tenet. It is what communism is. It's abolishing private property. It's abolishing the family. It's abolishing nations and borders. And I would be even more specific. Communism is abolishing people. Communism, socialism is the deadliest, most horrific gangsterism in the history of the world. It has led to more deaths than any other system in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And immediately you'll have these ignorant atheists and other people that'll spout, what about the Christian Crusades? You're talking about 23 battles versus over 1,000 battles regarding Islam, and that was just in the West.
Yep.
So 500 battles in Spain alone. So let's not have moral equivalency there. That's not true. And the other part of this is that with the communists, and with communism, everywhere they've been, that's exactly what's happened. Millions, tens of millions have died in China. Millions died in Cambodia. Tens of millions died in the former Soviet Union, just to name a few.
Yeah, it's interesting here. Listen to what he says here about religion.
Well, can I say Jesus Christ is a nationalist?
You say that a lot.
I do, and this is why.
But we can say it again.
Because I'm trying to give moral clarity here. Jesus created nations in Genesis 10, he judges in Matthew 25, and nations continue on into eternity. They continue on until the new heaven and new earth come down. So we are inherently as Christians nationalistic in the sense that we recognize the right of nations to exist.
Yeah, here he actually mentions Christianity.
I'm sure he does.
In here. He says, when the ancient world was in its last throes, the ancient religions were overcome by Christianity. When Christian ideas succumbed in the 18th century to rationalist ideas, feudal society fought its death battle with the then revolutionary bourgeoisie. The ideas of religious liberty and freedom of conscience merely gave expression to the sway of free competition within the domain of knowledge. Undoubtedly, it will be said, religion, moral, philosophical, and juridical? I don't know how to say that. Okay. Whatever, we'll move on. Ideas have been modified in the course of historical development, but religion, morality, philosophy, political science, and law constantly survived this change. There are, besides, eternal truths such as freedom, justice, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths, it abolishes all religion and all morality, instead of constituting them on a new basis. It therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience. What does this accusation reduce itself to? The history of all past society has consisted in the development of class antagonisms that assumed different forms at different epochs. And then he goes on to say...
So he admits to when the communism abolishes all religion, truth, and morality.
All eternal truths, yes.
So, but he just said there were eternal truths. And so it's so interesting. So how can you abolish something that cannot be abolished? Number one. Number two, when you say abolishing religion, religion exists in the heart of people in the sense of relationship with God. So you're talking about abolishing people. You're talking about killing people. And that's why communism, very simply put, is the religion, the theopolitical construct of killing, stealing, and destroying. That's what it's about. Communism does not raise society up. It tears societies down.
I mean, it's clear. It's literally trying to tear down everything that we've set up, established as a world. And I mean, we go through here, we've got the 10 generally applicable things here by Marx that most communist societies should follow. 1, abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Okay. 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax.
Why? Here's why.
Let
me explain this. So private property is capital. Okay,
correct.
so it's the means of production.
He wants to take that away.
Yeah, so you take away the means of production because you take away the ability of people to fight back.
And you can no longer charge rent for people living on your land because it's not yours.
So for people that aren't creating something off of their property, they're working for somebody. So the way to deprive them of the ability to enjoy the fruits of their labor is through a progressive income tax.
Because it gets higher and higher. Yeah,
progressive income tax should be abolished in the United States, and I hope it happens in our lifetime.
This one shocked me. 3, abolition of all right of inheritance.
Why?
So wealth can't be passed down.
Exactly, and you can't pass down freedom, liberty, generation to generation. In addition, what's fascinating about that is the scripture says that we have an inheritance.
Yep.
So again, contradicting the Bible directly.
Number 4, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels.
So, confiscation of all migrants.
It says immigrants. E-M-I-G-R-A-N-T-S.
Yeah, immigrants.
That's what I thought.
Same, and rebels.
Yep.
So anybody that they come against, they will steal their property. They will loot them. And that's exactly what they did. They actually went to the private farms, and the Kulaki put up a huge fight. The productive members of society put up a huge fight against the communists, and they seized their farms and their means of production and their ability to fight back. They stole it all.
So terrible.
Because communism doesn't create things. It loots, and then it will exist for a while as long as it can exist on the loot that it's taken, and then eventually it will collapse.
Yeah, because everyone's fallen under that collective laziness we talked about earlier.
Right, which is why China right now is facing an existential crisis, because Trump understands this, and the Chinese, even though they had some liberalization of their economy, it's still not enough, and they're not able to compete truly.
Here it gets a little more interesting. Confiscation of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. So earlier he's talking about how it's not fair that individuals have monopolies on certain means of production. So now we just want to shift that to only one person having access to the monopoly.
Yeah, see, the logical fallacy here is...
How does that make that better?
Yeah, exactly. The logical fallacy here is that he tries to make it sound like he's taking it from people and giving it to an organization, but organizations are run by people, right? So you're just giving it to fewer people that you select.
Exactly. And you being one of them because you started it.
Right. So the Federal Reserve System, the entire banking system that we have in the West right now was born out of the idea. There's a book written about it called The Creature from Jekyll Island, was born out of the idea of communism.
Ooh, that's not a good look, America. We should fix that.
We should get rid of the Federal Reserve.
It's not a good look. All right, number 6, centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state.
That's exactly public transit and PBS are communist
ideas.
Cell phones. Come from communist ideas.
You can only call who the government says you can call. You can only go where the government says you can go. You can't have your own car. What? They were saying how they want to take away all of our cars. And then they were saying they wanted us all to have electric cars. And if you didn't have an electric car, you couldn't drive on the road because of CO2 emissions.
So understand something, that there's some genius behind Elon Musk that needs to be said here, okay? And I'm not getting into the AI thing, and we've talked about that before, but having your own car that can drive yourself, that means even those people who are incapable of driving can get in a car and it can take them to where they want to go. It actually increases freedom in a sense where you don't have to have public transit anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it is, public transit has always been a boondoggle. I mean, you can go here in Washington State, they were still trying to do light rail, even though we don't even have anywhere near population density to even justify it regarding just purely numbers, let alone policy, but just purely numbers. Don't even have it, right? So it should always be crushed in Washington State, light rail, because it's just...
I've used public transport in Europe in very dense cities. Like when I lived in Budapest for 6 months, I always used public transport. It was amazing. Yeah. I felt very safe. I felt very normal. I mean, because kind of everyone uses it there. I mean, I knew maybe 2 people that had lived there for 5-6 years that had gotten mugged. 2 out of everyone that I met there.
So the question is it government's role or job to do public transit? The answer is no. So should transit be privatized?
No.
See, this is the catch, isn't it?
What do you mean privatized?
Should a private company run
all the public transit?
No, just some of the public transportation system.
I don't know.
So this is what Elon Musk is getting to. If you have a car that can drive itself, I don't even have to get into any of those arguments. Because sometimes what happens with a privatizing of transit, it will go to certain winners who are handpicked. And again, you're back to the same idea of oligarchy, right? When it's decentralized, this is super critical. When transportation is decentralized to the individual,
right?
Now that argument goes out the window. Just like electrical generation, if every home has a small modular nuclear reactor combined with hydrogen fuel cells, all of a sudden you have every single house is generating their own electricity. That is completely independent, different, and it's actually a more resilient system.
Yeah.
Because public transportation has been the focus of terror attacks and some other things, congregation of people. If you have everything decentralized, it actually works better.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind free market economics is the more decentralized things can be in an economy, the better.
Yeah. All right. And number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan.
This is the birth of environmentalism.
I was going to say, I have no idea what that meant.
It's the birth of environmentalism, just simply put. And here is one of the biggest objections to capitalism. And what some people will call crony capitalism, the idea that it's not truly capitalism, it's just different winners in the private sector being picked over other people. Okay. So there's only a certain amount of people that are winning. The biggest objection is, well, that has led to, pollution and all of these things that are negative for the environment. Therefore, there has to be some government oversight over those things. And that's where there's a lot of a debate today. But in his context, environmentalism is used as a control mechanism to control the entire economy and to control people.
Control land.
Which means controlling people, right? Because land is nothing if you don't have people on it to produce from it.
Yeah, it's so interesting how he speaks about land, how saying that land is the most valuable thing, but therefore has no value. It really makes no sense. Here's this one really gets me. Equal obligation of all to work. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. So everyone has to work.
Yeah. The kolkhozniki, the collective farms, was a derogatory term for the former Soviet Union, and even today. So kolkhoz, the collective farm folks, kicked off the farmers, and then they became the ones that worked the farms. Once again, production levels went way down. They were not very efficient, and Russian agriculture struggled for years, even when it was supposedly modernized to try to keep up with the West. And this is why.
It's so interesting to me because he's just saying everybody has to work, but nobody's going to get paid like they should. Just doesn't make sense. All right, number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industry, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country.
Yeah, so he doesn't like rural areas. I'm going to tell you why. Actually, Thomas Jefferson talks about this as a founding father of the United States. He talks about how the values that make a country great are always kept in rural areas because of their proximity to real life and to the cycles of life in the farm or the ranch. And therefore, it is an incubator and it is a preserver of those values over generations. So what Karl Marx is trying to get at here is he's trying to eviscerate those distinctions by having a certain amount of people moving and forcibly moved into the country. Seeing this in China right now, forcibly moved into the country so that they can't have generational instilling of values. Then some of those people in the country are moved into the city. So you have it mixed so it can't be passed down. So Thomas Jefferson really nailed this, hundreds of years in advance, that there is something about rural areas that really preserve the values of a nation and what makes a nation great. When we come back from the break, more on Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back from the break with our final of the 10 thingies, principles, things that Karl Marx would like your communist country to follow. So, you're building your own little communist network. Here it is, straight from the horse's mouth. Number 10, free education for all children in public schools. Notice how he says in public schools. Okay. Abolition of child factory labor in its present form. Notice how he says in its present form. Combination of education with industrial production, etc.
So public education, as we know it today, was born in communism. And that's why decentralization of education, again, here, this is a very common theme here, is the solution. In fact, the founding fathers were all homeschooled, in the sense that we would kind of think about it today. They had schools where they learned from home, or they would get together infrequently, but regularly. And if you see the centralization of education, what comes after that is centralization of ideas. Only certain ideas are taught in government schools. Other ideas are completely thrown out. And what's been interesting over the last 50 to 70 years is the ideas that are thrown out are always seemingly Christian. And that's why the return of the 10 Commandments is a historical document into our classrooms. Return of other documents like the Beatitudes into our classrooms as historical documents are so important, because if you don't know the foundational principles of a country, you're going to go right off a cliff with Karl Marx, and it's only 1 or 2 generations away from extinction. You're a republic.
I think it's interesting how he says abolition of child factory labor in its present form. I feel like that has some significant meaning. You know, we always talk about how words have meaning. So he said, you read that, initially you go, oh, no more child factory labor. But then if you read it closer, it says in its present form.
In its present form.
So he's going to change it a little bit. This is my guess. I'm like, so therefore he could just change it and say, well, I did what I said I was going to do, because I said it wasn't going to exist how it used to exist. Now it's existing the way I want it to.
Right. So life in for example, the former Soviet Union revolved around work. So they didn't outright abolish Christianity. What they would say is you need to work on Sundays. And so Christians wouldn't show up for work on Sundays. They would know who didn't show up for work, and they would presume they were Christians.
Yeah.
So they would enforce the work laws as ways of crushing the church on a Sunday. And then they would say internationally, oh, we have freedom of religion. It's right here in Constitution of the Soviet Union. And it was, again, very disingenuous.
Yeah.
Because what they're trying to do, again, is make every single human being a commodity in the sense of labor.
When he says combination of education with industrial production, what does that mean?
You would educate people in tracks. Okay. So, and you can actually hear that today in some circles with educators about tracking kids. So, for example, if they decide you at 10 years old are showing an aptitude for welding, you're in the welding track. That's all you do. You go down that track through education, and
so you have absolutely no opportunity to do anything else.
Rest of your life, you're not doing that. Yeah. And so in America, that's like shocking to us, because we have a sense that we can do whatever we put our mind to, whatever God calls us to, and succeed at that.
That's so interesting, because that, for me, that right there connects the sentence above it. Yeah. Abolishing child factory labor the way it is now. Okay, well, now it's not just child factory labor. It's education. Oh, no. You're really good at this, little Jimmy. You should definitely go weld in that factory.
To learn.
You should go learn.
Yeah.
But he's literally doing the same thing. They're like, no, we're just educating him for the career we chose for him. We're not even his parents, but
that's right.
He's better than Jimmy, being accelerated in welding. Timmy is going to sew. with the little girls and get his thumb caught in the giant sewing machine.
Typically in Slavic culture, that wouldn't happen, but okay.
Do they not? I mean, I don't know what they do.
It's very interesting. Now you can kind of hear it with Putin, right? Putin has come out totally against LGBTQ and come out against trans, all that stuff. He says, see the moral rot of the West, right? And it's really...
He doesn't think that there's gay people in his country.
Well, he knows there is, and he cracks down on them pretty hard. But it's interesting that he stands up and will say that now today. But really what that is an outgrowth of Slavic culture stemming back to the Eastern Roman Empire. That's where that kind of comes from.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Karl Marx brings up, the Roman empires and the medieval times and how everything was the same for so long until America came around and just revolutionized the industrial world.
He's correct. Everything was the same. Everybody was ruled by kings.
Mm-hmm.
That was the default of the entire planet. Now, you might call him a chief. You might call him a different name, but it was essentially a king.
Emperor.
The world was ruled by
Tsar.
kings. When America came around, we, the people, became the government of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And as Christians, temple of the Holy Spirit, the body of the believer, presupposing that we're one believers and two show up so that the Holy Spirit can work through us. That was the genius of the founding fathers, was that God was speaking not through one man. God was speaking through community. And I want to say this again, because this is super important for especially Christians to get. The problem was the divine right of kings. The king would always say, well, I hear from God and this is it, even though it probably wasn't God. It was his own flesh or his own intellect. But when God speaks through community, it's very hard for that to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the fundamental Christian difference between systems there. And here we actually achieved where the people had a say and the people were the most prosperous in the history of the world. And the system is the best. And everybody knows it. And that's why they say, well, you can't say America's the best. Yes, we can. It is exceptional. This system worked and everybody else is trying to copy it.
What's interesting is this whole idea of like nationalism, and everyone says, oh, Christian nationalism is so bad. But what's interesting is I want Christian nationalism for every country. I would hope that if you're from Greece, you want Christian nationalism and have Christian values rule your nation. Yeah. If you're from Russia, I would hope that you would want that for your nation. If you're from Hungary, if you're from any other country in the world, Tanzania, I would hope that you would want that for your country.
And that's why it's really always been the target. Communism's target always.
Well, it's so interesting.
Has been Christianity and has been America.
Because it says here, this is what it thinks of political power. When in the course of developments, class distinctions have disappeared and all production has been concentrated in the hands of a vast association of the whole nation, the public power will lose its political character. Political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing another. If the proletariat during its contest with the bourgeoisie is compelled by the force of circumstances to organize itself as a class, if by means of a revolution it makes itself the ruling class and as such sweeps away by force the old conditions of production, then it will, along with these conditions, have swept away the conditions for the existence of class antagonisms and of the classes generally, and will thereby have abolished its own supremacy as a class. In the place of the old bourgeois
nonsense.
I know. In the place of the old bourgeois society with its classes and class antagonisms, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all.
Yeah, which is total and utter nonsense because it denies human nature.
I just feel like he just said so much and said literally nothing.
Yeah, he went around like this in a circle. He kind of sounded like Kamala Harris. So my point with what was said there and communism is that today it has been dressed up, it has been made cool. But all communism really is the constant critique, undermining, and destruction of traditional institutions to collapse a country. And again, aimed at one country, aimed at one religion. Christianity, aimed at America. So to fight this with the truth, you have to ask yourself some questions. Why has America lasted so long? Why has America created so many people and so much wealth and helped so many people around the world? Why is this the best system? Not a perfect system, but why is it the best system in the world that operates the best for the greatest good and the greatest amount of people. Why? Communism clearly only operates for a select few, clearly has led to death, destruction, and thievery around the world, everywhere it's been tried. And they're always like, well, you just didn't do it right.
Brings everyone down to one level.
Yeah, well, you guys just didn't do communism right. We're going to try it again, right? And it's because
doesn't seem to be working so well.
Human nature requires competition. Human nature requires love. Human nature requires God and morals. And our republic requires morality rooted in Judeo-Christianity. Okay, so the original beliefs through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, and then also rooted in the teachings of Jesus Christ specifically. And I'm not talking about Mosaic law here. I'm talking about thou shalt not kill, all right, or thou shalt not murder more appropriately. Thou shalt not envy.
Right.
Right. I'm talking about those things, the basic moral foundations of the country. It has to be rooted in that, our republic. Otherwise, the republic's going to lose its mooring, and there's going to be a war, physical war, when it's just a cultural war right now. And we are in a war of two different worldviews and cultures. One worldview won't let the other exist. One allows free and open debate, free markets, and wants prosperity for everyone.
I think it's interesting that as we dive deeper into the ideas of Karl Marx and the actual Communist Manifesto, we can kind of pick out the things that have been happening in society over the last 5-10 years. And we can really see the communist ideas that have infiltrated our society. Yeah. It's very clear, things that abolish eternal truths, things that have been true for so long, all of a sudden are not truth.
Yeah.
So there's boys and girls. For some reason, that's no longer a common truth.
Yep.
Marriages between one man and one woman. For some reason, that's no longer a common truth.
Abolish the family.
Exactly. And now we're trying to abolish nations and borders.
Yeah.
Free and open immigration for everybody. How's that working out for Europe? How's that working out for England? Not so good. Not so good.
So what can you do? Teach your children and your grandchildren about the truth and why America is great. It's because it's been Christian.
Some light bedtime reading, the Communist Manifesto.
But make sure they know and don't sweep it under the rug. This is Matt Shea and Megan Needham once again with a Gen Z episode here at Patriot Radio. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. So keep up the fight.